Hello and g'day. Welcome to part 4. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to sew in the signature for the recycle a book cover for a junk journal that I showed you how to make in part 2 and part 3. This video today will teach you how to hand sew in the pages, about the thread I used, and how to make a whole template as your sewing guide. I explain and show you each stitch that I sew in all 3 signatures so you can see in real time how it's done. I'm not going to skip any steps. You'll be watching me do the whole lot. So hang on to your hat and let's get started. We're going to sew in 3 signatures and we're going to use the 3-hole pamphlet stitch. Now don't be afraid to use a hand sewn stitch to put your pages into the cover. It's pretty much a running stitch. We're going to have 3 holes. We're going to poke them in using a pokey tool. You can use a skewer style pokey tool, or you can use a modelling tool that you would have for polymer clay. Work out which order you want your signatures to be in. I'm going this first, second, third. Then we're going to make a template so we know where the 3 holes in the cover are going to go, and those 3 holes have to match perfectly with the signatures. So you need to take a bit of care with the placement of your holes and do one step at a time. Don't look at it like, oh my God, how am I going to do this? Just look at it and follow my lead, and I'm very confident that you'll be able to do it if you take your time. You'll need a reasonably sturdy needle. I'm using the bookbinders needle from Anderson's Bookbinding Australia. Grab a thread. You can use an upholstery thread. This is 100% polyester and I just got this from Spotlight. You can use wax thread. You can use this polyester thread and run it through a piece of wax if you wanted to. Just say this was a piece of wax. You just go like that and run it through. You can use a decorative heavier type of thread if you want something to show up. If you decide to sew through your cover and you want this to show on the outside and remain there as a decorative finish, you would use something like this. You can use floss. I think you guys in America call it floss. We call it embroidery thread. Work out what colour you want. So if you go this colour, when you put this in, you've got to work out what you want to show. Do you want this colour to blend in with the centre of your signature? Because when we sew these in, you're going to see these stitches on the outside of the cover. So you're going to see this colour on the outside. Now we can certainly fix that up and cover that. Or you've got to work out, do you want to use a black thread and not cover that up and have black stitches on the outside? Because you've decided you're not going to cover that up when we're finished. What you've then got to take into consideration is that black thread is going to show up in the centre of your pages. So give some consideration as to which one you want to show up more. You need to make a whole template because it will guide you to match each signature of the cover. You need to make one of these for every book you make that is a different size. Here's an example. If you make the same size book 10 times, you can use the same template. But if your book cover is a different size each time you make a book, you need to make a new whole template to match that book cover. To make your template, it needs to be the same height as your book cover. So just cut out a piece of paper the same height as your book cover. Make sure it's square. So you match your line there and it'll come square across the bottom. Test fit. Spot on. Right, now fold it in half so you can find your halfway mark. Now that halfway mark, fold line, is going to be the center of your spine. So our spine is, in this book, is just under an inch wide. So this fold line is going to be the center of that. Smack bang down the middle. So I'll draw that in so you can see it. Now I'll just quickly draw the width of the spine. Gotta make sure everything's square. I've got 3 signatures to sew in, right? So I need one here, one on the center, and one here. I'm not going to sew them bang close together like that. I'm going to sew them with a little gap in between each one. So if you look at that line on my paper, the center line is the dark black. The pencil lines are the outside of my spine. So if you look at my fingers, they are going to be the outside of my spine. Let me show you. I'm going to zoom in close so that all you see are my pencil lines. So let's measure and work out where we are going to put these signatures next to this one. How much space do you want from the edge of the spine before you sew this signature in? You can halve that, so you can take your ruler and measure exactly half if you want it to be exactly half. So I've got, if I use millimeters, I've got 12 millimeters, so I can mark a 6 millimeter line there, and I've got a 6 millimeter gap and then a signature, a 6 millimeter gap and then a signature, a 6 millimeter gap, where is that? And then a signature and another 6 millimeter gap and then the edge of the spine. So I'll mark that in the center. And I'm going to mark where my signature needs to go. Right there. Turn it around and I'm going to do the same here. Square it up at the bottom here and put it in exactly the same place. Squaring it up there as well and mark my line all the way down the page. So the dark lines here are now where I'm going to sew my signatures in. The light pencil lines are the edge of my spine. We've gone over that, I don't need to keep saying it. Now we've got our placement of the width of our signatures, how they're going to go inside that little tiny spine area. So I'm going to come down about 2.5 centimeters to 1 inch on the center line and mark my first hole. Same from the bottom to the top, around about 1 inch and mark my first hole. These are the stitch holes that I'm marking right now. Because we're doing the 3-hole pamphlet stitch, I need 3 of them. So I've marked the top and the bottom. Now I need one smack bang in the center. So I'm going to use my center ruler to do that. and it measures equally from the 0 back that way to the 0 back that way, and I'll pop my center hole smack bang in the middle. Then all I do is transfer those holes across to signature 1 and 3. You can use a ruler if you like to make sure you get it right, or you can use your eye if you've got a good eye. So we'll do that here and here. If you get this really neat to start with, when you transfer these holes to your signatures and to your cover, chances are your lines on the outside of your signature are going to look nice and straight. So if you've done this before and your stitches are crooked, maybe it's because you have had your holes placed slightly off. Keep them nice and straight and use a square ruler. If you haven't got a square ruler, measure. So if you've measured everything properly, it'll work. So now I'm just going to mark, I know that's the top because I've written the words front and back there. So I've got top there and bottom there. That's my template made, ready to mark the holes in my cover and my signatures, and I know they'll all match. So go grab yourself a phone book and I'll show you how to put the holes in. We're going to use a phone book as a cradle. Right, so open it up to the middle and see how it's got that little trench in it. That's going to allow us to be able to put the book in there and act as a cradle. It's a perfect tool to be able to mark our holes. We're going to mark the holes in the signatures as well as in the cover. So we'll do the cover first. We'll shut it to do the cover and we'll pop that in here, and it's just sitting inside the spine. You can see there, well you might not be able to see this as easily as I can, but I can see that this is sitting perfectly inside that area of the spine. So just move it until it's lined up top and bottom. Now the spine might not be level. I can see that my paper is tilted upward. When you're recycling stuff, you'll find that it may never be perfect. So I've got that lined up as close as I can to how I want it. So I'm just going to get my pokey tool. I'll start with the center and straight up and down. I'm just going to put my hand over the top of that pokey tool and push it down into the phone book. I want to go all the way in little tiny screw movements until I feel that it's right down through the fabric and through the cover. You'll know when you get through. So just keep on doing that and do that to all of the holes that you've got to mark. If for some reason you don't go all the way through, I wouldn't worry about it too much. We can go back and re-drill them. There's our first 3 done. You notice I'm not moving this template at all. You need to use a little bit of pressure doing that to be able to get it all the way through. Okay, I can see the holes are all the way through, so I can now remove my template. And there they all are. You see a little bit of a bulge from the tool pushing through the cover. We can certainly fix that up. Now, I've used the fabric here, and you'll possibly use a fabric that you can't see where the holes are. There's 3 there that show up okay. Those 3 there you can barely see, and those 3 there you can barely see. Because I'm going to sew the signatures in on this area, I'm going to mark them. So I want to be able to make sure I can see them. So I'm just going around the edge and just marking them. Don't go overboard with your marks. Right, now there's my holes all marked. Now I've done my cover, I am ready to do my signatures. Doesn't matter which signature you do first. What does matter is that they are the right way up. Okay, so that's checking your cover is the right way up, and then check your pages. So do a quick check of that first and make sure everything is the right way up. Now before I sew these in, I want to go over this little envelope that I did say in part 2 I was going to sew in. If I want to put this envelope in as a page, all I would do is then take out one of these pages so it's not too bulky, because if it's too bulky, it just is too bulky. It's as simple as that. So you decide which page you're going to take out, and you would put that in there. That's where the template comes back in, and you've got to make sure that your envelope is going to get sewn in with these stitches. The way I've got these stitches marked here is they're going to miss the envelope and it would only have 1 stitch in it. So I've decided not to use this envelope in these signatures. For me to use this envelope, what I would like to then do is have my first hole here down here further. I would have it about there and about there. So that means I would have a stitch here, here and here, which would make that a lot more secure. If I have 1 stitch in there, it's going to wobble around. If I had it in the center. If I was to put it behind another page, that would stop it from wiggling around. It would be more secured. So you could decide whether or not you wanted to put an envelope in. Just be aware that if you're only using 3 stitches, this type of thing might be more suitable for the 5-hole pamphlet stitch. Don't worry about it too much, because I'll show you how to do that in a separate video. Bring back my phone book, got my template, top, and everything is ready to go. Open it up. I'm only going to put the holes in 1 signature at a time. What we need to do now is make sure everything is straight and in the middle. So my first page has to be straight and level with the top and the bottom of my signature. So I'm going to straighten that up with an even gap, top and bottom. And you just go ahead and do that all the way through. It doesn't matter if they're all different heights, as long as they are even top and bottom. Okay, so now I've got all my pages level to where I want them. I'm going to fold it all back up. I've got my clamps here ready, folding it back up. They're still level, top and bottom. Now I've pushed everything back into the center, and with the book semi-closed, clamp here. All right. You can put a clamp on the other side if you like. We've got our template. Make sure that you've got the top and the bottom. So just double check again now before we put our template in, because our template is marked top. That is the top of our book. Put the template back in. This template is going to be a little bit longer than our pages because remember, our book cover is bigger. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a mark on this template here to show you where the top and the bottom of the pages are. Open this up and trace the same line to the inside. The very outer edge is the outside of my book cover, and this little line here, I'll make it into a dash, which is the pages line. We only need 1 row of holes for the pages, so we will only need to use the center line, the one marked in red here. I'm just going to wedge the signature into here and line the pages up with my template, matching the dash line to the edge of the top of my pages here. Pushing the template and my signature down, I'm going to go straight in and punch my first hole, forcing the pokey tool all the way into the phone book. I've nearly got my book closed, and I'm going to find the top hole and crunch that down into the phone book as well. Go back to the bottom and do the same mark there. Remove the template, and now I've got all my holes marked to match the holes here. And see, I've still got that little space on the top and that little space on the bottom, but the holes match here and here and here. Okay, so there is number 1 ready to be sewn in. So let's do number 2. We'll do the same again. Open it up to the center. Make sure everything is nice and square in the center, all the pages. Put a clamp on it when it's nearly closed. Bring the template over and put that in when it's nearly closed. Line the template up. So that's why I've got it marked on the outside and on the inside. Bring the phone book back. Place it into the center. Making sure I've got my top and my bottom, top of the cover, top of there, doing a last minute check. Make sure my pages are up the right way, last minute check. Check twice, cut once, they say in carpentry. Push it down into the phone book and push your center, then your top, then your bottom stitch holes. Take the template away and we're all good to go. We've got our 3 holes in exactly the same place as the first one we've done. It's much easier when all of your pages are nearly the same. I didn't do this lesson using all different sized pages because I think it's much easier for you to be able to do if they are nearly all the same length. I'll clear this up and I'll come back and get the needle and thread ready and we'll sew them all in one by one. To sew in the signatures, you need a bookbinder's needle. If you don't have a bookbinder's needle, just use whatever you've got that you think will be strong enough to sew through the papers and the cover. We'll start with the last signature. So we've got signatures 1 on the first one, signature 2 in the middle, and signature 3 at the back of the book, which is this green one here. So I'm going to measure out 3 lengths. You don't need 3 lengths, but I'm wanting you not to run out of thread. So we'll cut off that thread and of course thread your needle and get that ready to start sewing. All we do is you get this in the position that you're comfortable with. So for me, being right-handed, I'm going to just pop that in here and I'm going to put my needle through the center hole first. So it's going through that hole. If you open your book up flat, the holes won't line up. I won't be able to put my needle through. It's just going to go nowhere. If I close my book a little bit, my needle's going to find that hole very easy and come straight out the other side. See that? And that's because when I made the hole in my book, it was almost closed. So therefore, when I put my needle through, it makes sense to almost close your book again and find that same path. So pull that through and leave a tail on the inside of your book. Because we've got plenty of thread, we're going to leave a long tail. Now we need to put it in the cover. I'm going to go to the back of the book, being the last hole, but in the center. I've marked my hole. So I'm just going to sew through that hole. And now I've got a little stitch that started attaching my signature to my cover. Right, we'll take that clamp out. We don't need it there. Okay, now you can turn this up any way you like. Again, double check and make sure your signature's up the right way. You do not want to sew it in your book upside down. Okay. Now because I'm right-handed, I'm going to come back up to the top. You can flip your book over to make it work however easy it is for you to handle it. Come back through this hole here. I'm still at the back of the book. Don't worry about that, that's gone all loose now. I'll let that happen. And I'm going to pull that a little bit tight. If I keep pulling it, it's just going to pull out because nothing's stopping it from coming out. While it's folded almost in half, I'm going to find the center of my book again. I'm going to clamp my fingers over the edge of that book and I'm going to bring the needle back through the top hole. And because the book is almost folded, it should find its way back through that hole reasonably easy. If it doesn't, you just have to start feeding it through a few at a time. Another tip when your needle doesn't go through easily is to come back to the inside, line it all back up and find the hole again. There, keep it level. See how I've lined it back up? Pinch that page there, hold it in place because they sort of moved when I unclamped it, and then poke the needle back through and it'll come back out into the center a lot easier. Because as soon as those pages move a little bit, they don't line up. Now I've just put my needle down and it's okay to do that. All right, all my stitches at the moment are quite loose. I'm not worried about that, I'll tighten them up in a minute. So I'll move this out of the way, I'll pick up my needle again, and this is what I mean by a running stitch. I'm going to make one long running stitch all the way back down to the bottom of the book. I'm going to miss this middle hole and I'm going to come back here to this hole here at the bottom. This is the top of my book, this is the bottom. Close it up to how it was so it's easier to find this hole here and bring it out. All right, so there I've got one long running stitch in the middle of the book. Don't worry about that there, just leave that alone. Come back to this back hole here. This is hole number 3. And come through the cover and out. You can put your needle down and just pull your thread as you need to. Now just push your book to those holes. Don't pull that too tight because you will pull all your thread all the way through. You don't want to do that. Now we've got half a stitch there and we need to finish this one stitch off here. So we can come back through the same stitch here, leave it sitting there, open up your book, turn it over, do whatever you can to make it work easy for you, and then just grab that and pull that through, and there's your second stitch on the outside cover. But we're not finished sewing this piece in yet. We've got to come back through here, back to the inside of the book. Find the center of your pages again. We've got to bring it back in here to match up with this one here. So I'm just going to grab the tail of this one and pull it down here out of my way, and then see how everything's real loose here and here. I'm not too worried about that just yet. I'll show you how to tighten that up. My book is almost folded again, and I'm going to find my way back through to the center. Nearly there. Right, now bring it back through to the center, and there it is. I've got both my threads hanging out on the same side. I'm going to poke that one under that long stitch and bring it out to this side. I no longer need the needle, so I'll pull it up, away, and I'll shorten that thread just by that little bit to make it easier. One on either side. See how loose that all is? We definitely don't need it that loose. Now to begin tightening it all up. Grab your stitches and pull them. I just felt that take up all of that slack on the outside cover. Pull it towards the top and the bottom, not that way. And using my fingers, just give it a little bit of pressure. Then I'm going to take a little bit of a look and see where that's going on the outside. Still loose. Still loose. I can still see how loose that is, so I've got a little bit more work to do. Okay, so you want it tight. Put your finger on there and make sure that your stitches are tight enough to the cover here without dragging. What's the word? Without pulling. You don't want it to be pinched that tight that it's pulling. You just want it to be there. See how I've still got a bit of space at the top and a bit of space at the bottom because my holes all match perfectly. Keep that tight. If you've got another person in the room, now is when you call them over and ask them to put your finger on here. Now let's see which finger I'm going to use to tie this knot. So I'm going to put my finger on there and somehow loop that around, and still not letting go of my holding point until I get it as close as I can to keep that tight. Tied my first knot, and I'm going to twist it around and tie a second knot, and that's to there, and I'll just cut that off and leave it long. So there's my first signature in, and it's sitting nice and close to the spine but not too tight. go through and just push down all of your pages a couple at a time. If it's too tight, you'll pull your holes and possibly rip your paper. Just need that right tension there. Now, given some time, and when we put the other signatures in there, this will all lay flat. You can also just give it a little bit more persuasion with your bone folder. But like I said, overuse and over time, that will settle. The second signature, just check and make sure it's the one you want to go in the middle. And we're going to have that tiny little gap because we've got our hole spaced where we've left that gap. And it's very deliberate that we left that gap. This one here, see, we've got a gap between there and where the spine starts. Let me show you that. That's where the spine ends there. So we've got that gap there. And now we've got a gap there. Okay, let's get this one ready. Same again. Let's measure our 3 lengths of thread. 1, 2, 3. You see, I only had that much left over from 3 lengths. And we'll start from the center again by closing that book a little bit, coming straight through to the outside, leaving a tail on the inside of the book. Find the center hole here in the middle of the cover and do the same again. Just come out to the outside and leave a loose stitch there. Come back up to the top in the middle, outside cover, and come back to the inside. I'm going to pull that needle back through to the inside. If you tried to get the hole from the cover to the signature all in one go, you'd be pretty lucky. So that's why I'll bring it through the cover first and then come back and do it through this signature separately. So come back through here into the center from the outside of the signature, back to the inside of the signature, and leave a loose stitch there. Same as the first one, we're going to miss that center hole and we're going to come all the way down and make a stitch to the bottom hole. Need to close that book a little bit for it to find its way through that hole path. I'm out there. Now I need to come back through the cover, through that marked hole, back to the outside. I'm going to take my clip out so it can be in the right place there. Now I've got 1/2 of the stitch. I'm going to come back to the middle of that center stitch line and come back into there. I can keep that stitch out of the way because I don't want to put my needle through that stitch. I want to go beside it, and I also just grab that needle. That's where we've got a little bit more to work with here. Got a little bit more things to work around, I should say. So now we come back through the inside of the signature, find the center again, through that hole that you made. I'm going to make sure we're all got all them holes all lined up. When they're not lined up, which they've moved, reposition all of them holes by getting your pokey hole to the inside and bringing it back through gently. Go gently or you'll make a new hole, and just line up your holes again. Right, once you've lined up your holes again, like here, hold it, don't let those pages go, and that'll allow you to bring your stitch back in through that same hole that you just made, and you're back to the center. Right, now we need one lot of stitches on the right side of this long stitch and one on the left. Okay, I can cut that off. It's a little bit harder to see on this music sheet, but everybody likes to use music sheets, so I had to put one in. Pulling the thread from top to bottom of the book again, not side to side, and getting it nice and tight. Making sure, feel it. You can sort of feel it a bit like a guitar string, not too tight, not too loose, and tie that off. Don't forget, I've got one either side of that long stitch. That is pretty important. Don't miss that step. Get that double knot happening there, and cut your threads off. You can cut them off short or you can cut them off long. So we've got two in, and they're just at the right tension. Flatten them down. Believe me, there's nothing more horrifying than opening a book and realizing that you've sewn these in upside down. If you ever do, I haven't. I've always checked them. I haven't done that. But if you ever do, just come back, snip the threads out, turn them around, just snip these out, pull them out, turn them around and do it again. Number 3, which in fact is the first signature. So it's technically number 1. We're going to sew this one into the first lot of holes. Again, we're going to have a gap between that one and that one, like that just there. 1, 2, 3. Perfectly straight needle, because it's strong enough to handle this sort of work. I've got that ready to go. I'm going to open my center page, sewing from the first hole in the middle back to the outside of the signature. Find my first center hole back to the outside cover. Pull that through, leaving a tail. Back to the top, coming through the cover only. And once I've pulled that through here, I then can come back through and come into this signature here. Find the middle again, and keeping that signature folded over, come back through. Sometimes Sometimes it's easier to just turn everything around and go the way that you work, whether you're right-handed or left-handed. Right, now I can feel that come through. Because if you tried to keep that all perfect and tight, you would find it a little bit more difficult. So then we miss that middle again, come all the way down to the bottom, go through the bottom hole, back out to the outside, and through the bottom hole in the cover to the outside. And then we're going to come back up into the middle hole, back to the inside cover. I'm going to turn that over because I did find that a lot easier to come back in on this right way. I need to shorten that tail a little bit there and make it one instead of double. Find the middle again. And then come back through the middle, right back through the centre of the signature. I had that and it come back out. Right, back through to the centre. Right, we need one on one side under there of that long stitch and one on the other. Cut that off, turn him around and tighten it again. Go steady first and then give it a wiggle. Holding it. Double knot. Cut off that thread. 3 nice even stitches. Got the gap between there and the start of the curve. Anything, you can use your fingers, you can use your bone folder and just train those pages to lay nice and flat. Now I have sewn in 3 signatures. It's a much better book if you've got it sewn in 3 separate signatures. They just lay flatter. They're just easier to use. Plus, when you put pockets and ephemera in here, everything takes up a lot better because you've got that gap which allows you to put more stuff in. So that's the end of part 4. We'll move on to part 5. We'll talk about what we can do to finish off the cover and what are junk journals even for. I'm Donna. Thanks for watching and bye for now.